Hello, good morning, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, Disembodied Hands Quindy, Disembodied Beard John, and somewhere here in spirit, off in the ether, Justin's around. I have faith. How are you all today? Sorry for the late start. I had kind of a weird medical morning. I don't talk about my malady very often, but sometimes it delays me. It delayed me this morning, so I don't have very many of those, but yeah. Hey, Higzilla. I'm glad you're fabulous. I'm glad you're fabulous. Fabulous is a great thing to be. Sweet. Oh, you're a little behind, too. Wow. Good. We're all behind. We're all behind. Yep. Hey, Celeblum. How's it going? So we're here with a Jolie. A Jolie who we rosied up last time because her skin tone before a rosy was more like this. And actually, if I turn it, you can see the original color, which is very similar to the cream color we had. So what I did is I added rosy tones to the skin tone, and now we can tell that her skin is different than the cream. So there we are. Yes, we did a lot of rosying up of her for sure. Hey, D. Clearman, God, 51 months. God, do you have a life, man? You know I'm kidding. Thank you. Oh, wow. Oh, yuck, Fancy. Yuck. I feel so sad for you. I'm so sorry that you have that chronic sleep thing. Sleep is my #1 priority in my life. So, if I had that kind of thing, I would be a wreck. So yes. The 25th Quarterly Community Contest. Oops, don't say that 5 times fast. I don't know, Hig. I don't know. Okay, well, you don't pay attention to the silver streaks here, and maybe you can. Although if I was actually 4 years old, I think you'd all notice. Alrighty, what are we doing today? We're highlighting skin. Let's highlight skin. I've got my card with what I used for her original skin. We already had. We had started with more of a rosy tone, but it just wasn't enough to really separate out her skin. We've also, if you notice, we don't have a lot of darks on her. Like the blue is darker. I've shaded it to be darker. But we're probably going dark with the leather just based on that, based on my law of contrasts that you all know I always, I almost always adhere to. That said, we do have the border here of her robe, which it's pretty intricate and could be fun to do some gold NMM on, so I think I will do that. We've also got lots of little things back here. Oh, looks like we've got a little bit of a cleanup issue back here, actually. A little bit of a flash here. Let's take that off with a knife. But we do have some room for accent colors. Not a lot of it. And we got to do the gold border on her sleeves too. So we have quite a bit to do, and we'll have to figure out accents. Now we do have some areas, like on the underside of the book, those 2 inner panels, we could do an accent color there. The problem is, as you can see, it's going to be in shadow, so we're not really going to see that color. So as we consider where to put accent colors, we need to think about the fact that we're only going to see them from certain angles probably. Most of her accoutrements that you could put accent colors on are back here. We could put some color in the book, but again, that's edgewise onto the viewer, so it's going to be a little bit different. We could maybe use the lenses of her glasses with an unusual color. The obvious color to choose here would be red, but we don't have to. The reason I say that is both the cream and the gold will have a yellow tone. Obviously, the dress is blue. We already have a rosy tone for the skin, so we've already kind of got a red, yellow, blue thing going on. Splitting that and going in a different direction with the accent color can be done. It's just you won't get quite as good of a result as you will doubling down on the red to make it a true red in some of the accents. But that's basic, if you're doing triadic color theory. I have a very impressive vocabulary for a 4-year-old. Yeah, and I already, wrote 2 books. Crazy, huh? Have you had been looked at for something like sleep apnea? Because it is the most... what I find... Though, actually, it depends. If you have aches and pains, I find that doing stretches before bed helps me with that. But a lot of my, like if I have a disrupted sleep period, fancy, it's stress. Stress that most often disrupts my sleep if everything else is good. So maybe look at, like, I don't know if you have a very stressful life, but but if you are under a lot of stress at the times that you have those issues, that's probably it. There's not a whole lot of ways to fix it except to, like, maybe if meditation works for you, like kind of doing that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's why. Like, if I were me diagnosing myself having like no sleep, it would be, I would say it's stress related. Because if I'm going through a stressful period, I get terrible sleep scores. So maybe instead of like drinking after X or eating before X or not doing those things, maybe look at stress management techniques, something that you could do to help yourself out that way and see if that helps your sleep. Because honestly, if you're only getting 5 hours a night, even if it helps you to get an additional hour, it's worth it. So maybe look at that. Yeah, I would say so. I would say tackle that next. At least so that you could either eliminate, like if you get yourself feeling like better and more chill and less stressed and your sleep doesn't get better, then you know it's something else. But yeah, I mean, we're all just troubleshooting our lives, right? When it comes down to it, we're all trying to hack and troubleshoot our way to greatness. Yeah, but for me, if I was having that sort of thing and it was a stressful period, that would be the kind of the tip off for me that would be a stress thing. So yeah, do that kind of thing. Alrighty, cool. So yeah, but for now, today, let's talk about highlighting. Now, skin highlights are probably mixing skin highlights, especially for fairer skin, is the easiest thing in the world. And it's actually not hard for dark skins either. And it usually involves adding white, but usually you want a little bit of yellow in that white. So some people just split the difference and use something like linen white, or any sort of yellowish white works fine. Often I will use Osirian sand from the Pathfinder line because it's definitely got more yellow in it than linen white. Linen white is kind of like if you cut Osirian half and half with pure white. And I used to use linen white all the time for highlighting skin tones just because, like, at the time when I was practicing and getting better, everybody was doing that, using either ivory or linen white and just doing it that way. You can also do it the way where you add an actual yellow to your mix and then add pure white. If you do that, great, but don't add too much yellow. You really want to almost have yellow in a separate area of your palette or a separate well if you're me and you're using a well palette, and just add a little bit because you just need that little shift toward gold, because most of the time, unless it's golden hour, like if you are trying to paint a model that's in evening light where it gets very, very yellow, then you would use more yellow, but then you must be consistent about using that color across all your highlights. Vallejo ice white. Yeah, and Vallejo ivory a lot of people used to use. Actually, this is, I mean, like, I think they used to call it icy yellow, but there was a Vallejo color that was a lot like Osirian. So yeah, ice yellow. There we go. Yep. Yeah, Osirian sand is essentially ice yellow, guys. So we'll use Osirian today. And we'll grab our pure white. I've got 2 bottles of pure white. One is almost empty and one is almost full. I'm trying to use the empty one. But I mean, it's very, very simple. So we started out with a base that was more rosy, and then our mid-tone was the 4-to-1 tanned and peachy. And so we're going to start with that. That's already going to push us more golden because peachy is a very orangey skin tone and tanned is a neutral skin tone. So it's going to give us... this combination is going to shift us more toward orange, which is closer to yellow than this peachy tone. But then we're going to do one better. So let's just mix up I always have a mix of my base skin tone, like, ready while I'm doing highlighting, just in case I need to correct something. So you're using creamy yellow for everything. Are you using it to highlight everything, Colorblome, or is it a main color on, like, say, cloth and hair and stuff? So I'm using 4 drops of tan skin. Tan skin being the most versatile skin color in Reaper. If you get no other skin color from Reaper, get tan skin. I say this over and over and over again. The reason I do is that it's such a nice midline Caucasian flesh color. You can add white to it and it goes to a beautiful fair skin color. You can add red tones to it and it goes to a beautiful sunburn or wind-burned color, a weathered skin color. You can add any number of browns to it to tune it a little bit darker. You can mix rich leather into it to get a more Latin skin tone. So it honestly, you can make it almost anything. Hey, Miniatures Den, how's it going? We're doing highlighting skin today. So I'm mixing up my skin base color and I'm going to mix some highlights from it. The Paka people. It's the Paka people. Hope you're having a good day, Luca. I'm having a moderate day. I'm sore. My CrossFit class really got me last night. We jumped rope, guys. How long has it been since you jumped rope? For me, college. For David, elementary school. Jumping rope is hard. How did I ever do this for hours when I was a child? Oh my god. But yeah, everything was core last night. Like it was core day. Core day for the CrossFit, and my all my like back, not really my lower back, but my sides. Like it's like got all my lat muscles. Oh, I injured my back, but then I went to physical therapy, and I'm fine with jumping, although it definitely does work it, but I can't do sit-ups. So they have to, essentially I have to do a lot of planks, guys, at this CrossFit. Whenever there's a sit-up set, I substitute with planks, and it's not just planks. Like last night, it was doing a plank, and then like planking on one arm while I moved a weight across underneath me, and then planking on the other arm and moving the weight back. This is hardcore. But yeah, my core, I did put my back out. I have like lower spinal degeneration just from all those years of lifting giant paint buckets and all that. And all those years of crappy posture as well. Miniature painter, crappy posture are us. But the physical therapy and the yoga and everything strengthened my core to a point where I can do most functional things. No jumping. I see. Yeah, we do jumping jacks as part of our warm up at the CrossFit. I don't enjoy them, but I do them. But yeah, last night there was just a lot of core because it was jumping rope, and then it was kettlebell swings, and then it was the planks for me, and then we did squats with the like barbell squats, like where you've actually got weight. You're holding weight and you're doing squats as deep as you can go. So I only can do 25 pounds at this point. I don't even have weights on the end of the bar. I just use the 25-pound bar. Yeah. I am happy to be back lifting though. I do enjoy it. Like I do really enjoy it. I feel stronger already, which is great. My goal is to essentially, well, I worked up to this kettlebell. Like, I worked up to it big time, right? Since I injured myself, then I started, during the pandemic, David and I started doing yoga, and it helped my back so much that I started doing it every morning. So I do it every morning, and then I do stretches every night. So yeah, thanks, Fatherman. This is Jolie. She's a resculpt, a modern resculpt of an older Reaper figure. That's her item number. She's in Bones USA material, so this is actually a plastic material, a Cyocast plastic, not a PVC. So it has very excellent detail retention, and it's a really nice weight and just like quality. It's a Cyocast material is a really nice quality figure. Oh, nice. Yeah, physical therapy, they work you. Yeah, squatting and climbing and scrubbing. Yep, Agent Marvel, I feel it. Oh, I hated moving out. I hated cleaning our apartment after we moved out of our last one. So, all right, so I've got my main skin color here, which you can see is already a lot warmer than the rosy tone we've got. So I'm going to take that a couple brushfuls to a separate thing. I'm going to put some Mosserian sand in it. You can also use, another color I would use would either be like candlelight yellow plus white or lemon yellow plus white, actually. I do like lemon yellow sometimes. So I'm going to put 1 drop in here to shift it. And because I'm adding an off-white, anytime you're adding a color that has a ton of white in it, you've got to thin or you're going to get brush strokes. So I'm going to actually put 2 drops of water in with that drop of off-white and see where it gets me. Now with 28 millimeter, especially on faces, it's not important to have like a true layering consistency. Usually you could just apply the highlights in successive layers, and because the surface is so small and crammed with detail on faces, you really won't see transitions. There we go. So that's very thin. You can see how thin it is. It is layering consistency, actually. The way you can tell is if you spread it thin, it's pretty much invisible. But where it's pooling, it looks as strong as the color in the pool here. And that's pretty much a quick test to see if you're approaching or at layering consistency. Yeah, lemon yellow plus white is a good one. Lemon yellow is the color to mix highlights for greens. Like, it is the color. Like, this is the color. That lemon yellow is brilliant for mixing highlights for greens. Any green. Because it's got a heavy enough load of yellow that it's going to shift the green warmer. And it is a cool yellow, so it's meant to highlight greens. But it also has a load of white in it that will just give you a nice incremental highlight as you shift more and more lemon yellow into your green and less green. So that is its sweet spot right there. From there, you can also use it to highlight skin tones, as I mentioned. Oh no, mix it in with the green. Like, you can use it even to highlight things like ancient oak. Like, even dark greens. It'll mute it out a little bit, but you already have a muted color in ancient oak. But no, you mix it with the green in successive stages. Whenever you do that, Agent Marvel, whenever I say use this color to build highlights for X other color, building means you're doing increments. So you've got to do, say you start with like a dark green like pine green. So then your first highlight's going to be like 4 or 3 drops of pine green and 1 drop of lemon yellow. Then it's going to be 1 to 1. Then it's going to be more lemon yellow, but still a drop of the pine green. And then it's finally lemon yellow. So you're staging. You're building a 5 succession highlight. Or you can kind of, you can build fewer stages, but if you do that, you've got to thin a lot more if you're looking for smooth blends. But yeah, I find lemon yellow, I reach for it for skin tone highlighting and for greens, always for greens. Hello, Twistedoma. I had a bit of a morning, but I think I'm past it now. I'm kind of excited about today because I started, there's a free course for writers that they do like every 6 months for Amazon ads, and I enrolled in it. So I am watching, and I always encourage people to do this even with mini painting, but I'm watching essentially a basics course on Amazon ads. When you are trying to become a better painter, if you are trying to become a better painter, it's always of value to sometimes revisit introductory topics. Because, and I talk about beginner's mind a lot, and yes, it's very Zen, it's totally a Zen concept, but it's a very useful concept as well. Because after a while, our brain, we kind of get to thinking, oh, I already know that, right? Like I entered into this class kind of like with that in the back of my head, even though I try not to, oh, this is going to be a super basic course. I already probably know this. I've been running Amazon ads for a couple months now. And yet, within the first video, I've already learned 2 things. So every once in a while, don't be afraid to go back and revisit your foundations. You may kind of go in thinking it's a waste of time, and try to get your brain out of that mode. Try to get your brain into, this is a different instructor. Maybe I'll learn a trick, right? Maybe I'll learn just one thing. Go into it with an open mind and use it to tune the way you're thinking about your process, because you can really get a lot of value from that. You can learn more than you think. So yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's what lemon yellow excels at. It excels as you can just use it. You don't need to use anything else. You can just use lemon yellow to build highlights for greens, and it's brilliant at that. So I'm hitting almost the whole, pretty much the whole forehead to make it lighter. Let me see here, guys. I'm going to try to figure out, I think, because she's so light. There we go. Sometimes I have to put a little bit of white in the frame to make the model read better on camera if it's very light. And right now she got a lot of light on her, so I'm getting, this is real subtle, and I'm probably going to go down and actually do her calf. This is actually a layering consistency, like I did actually kind of nail it. So I can essentially put this highlight on the calf here, and it'll blend. See how I'm getting a beautiful blend there? Like that's that paint consistency that I showed you guys when you if you pull it over, if you work with a wet palette, then pull it over plastic or get a ceramic tile or grab your well palette that you never use to do that test. But if you could essentially spread it out real thin on your palette and see right through it where it almost doesn't exist, and then where it pools, it looks like it's full strength. You're really close to being able to do that perfect blend. And with skin tones, on 28 faces, it doesn't matter, but on big spaces like legs, like this, or torsos, it does matter. So getting that nice smooth finish on skin for younger characters, definitely useful. I'm going to get the shin bone where it comes down here. And when your paint's this thin, you can just spend some time building up a couple of layers of it. Yeah, I'm excited about my Amazon course. I'm going to be running some ads on East of the Sun. I've arranged all my advertising for the launch of West of the Moon. So I'm running a couple of ads with different services I haven't run before, so I'm interested to see how many clicks I get from those. The book is at, the first half of West of the Moon is at with my proofreader now. I'm working on still on edits on the second half because it needed more work. So a little bit more on the calf there. But when your paint is so very thin, you'll find that to get the real color, you'll need to do more than one highlight. You'll need to build it up. And that's what I mean when I say you can get away with doing fewer transitions if you have really thin paint. But mixing fewer transitions, rather. But if you're mixing fewer transitions, what you're doing instead is you are building up multiple layers of the color, the one color you're using. So like I can highlight a medium gray with pure white. I can just go from that medium gray all the way to pure white, but I have to have my white thinned to the point where it is able to do seamless blending, and then I have to build up a ton of layers of it. So like you can do it if you only want to have two colors and you just want to work with those. But for people who are not used to thinning or not able to nail that layering consistency and who want that smooth blend, then I usually say just mix more colors. If your colors are closer together as you transition, you can keep your paint thicker and still get a good blend. Whereas if they're farther apart, then you have to thin your paint a lot. And then there's always, if you haven't really worked with layering a lot, there's always that risk then of you over-thinning. Over-thinning is probably the most common problem I've seen with people trying to start to layer. And I was one that I had myself when I started. Come in here and get the décolletage here. But yeah, today is Patreon day, so I only can mess around with my writing a little bit. I worked on my Patreon yesterday. I have a cool $10 video I'm working on that was outlining about how to. We're doing mixing everything lately. So the video for my $10 Patreon tier this month is when you're working with those pure pigments like Reaper Clears or Chimera or things like that. How do you get some tricks to get coverage? And it's not just adding white, although I do talk about that and about how much. But there's other tricks. Yes, today is Alpaca Day, I believe. That is why the alpaca gave us a raid and then ran away. The Lord of the Alpacas. Get the side of the neck a little bit. Get the shoulder up here, where there be light falling. But yeah, so pretty much is going to be about how to work with coverage, how to get more coverage when you're working, because that's the biggest thing, right? Is figuring out mixing colors. But then when you're working with those pures, a lot of pure pigment colors are really light on the coverage, and the reason is that most of those pigments are finer grinds, and in a lot of hobby paints, you already have your paint person, your paint mixer, your line designer, adding various things in to aid coverage, right? So we're doing our tricks so you don't have to. But when you're working with pure pigment paints, there's nobody to rescue you that way. So you have to do it yourself. Hey, Big Chimpo, how's it going? I'm very interested to see if my proofreader actually comes up with how many errors she comes up with. I'm sure she'll come up with some, but my new editor is really good at catching that stuff. So I'm really wondering how much she'll catch. Alrighty. So first stage highlights on skin. Got to get the hand up here as well. Got to get some other parts of the face. Although I may stop because I've got my paint thinned so much. If I come in and try to hit these various parts of the face, it's not going to be actually very effective. I actually need a stronger paint to really highlight these little parts of the face, because otherwise you're sitting there trying to build up a tiny highlight on this tiny nose, where really you only just need a spot highlight. You're not really going to blend that. You want it to stand out. So that's why I say for faces, you don't need to have that perfect consistency for layering. It's almost a detriment when you're dealing with faces and ears and things like that and trying to get very small highlights down. Because it takes so long. And I'm going to not really highlight the fingers down under here. I might even throw an extra level of shading on them toward the end because they're in shadow and we would not have a highlight. Fingers got very, very rosy up here. But again, if I try to put this highlight color on these little fingers, it's very lightweight, and I really need it to be a bit stronger. So that's where I'm saying sometimes for very small details on skin tones, for fingers and face, you really actually want a thicker paint. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to mix it up. But first I'm going to highlight or shade all around the hand here. So I didn't line around it. I'm going to use my liner and just put a heavy shadow here in the hair. I can paint over it so it'll disappear later. There we go. Nope, I'm going to hold off. I'm thinking engineering, something engineering. She looks smart. She's very smart. She has that intelligent air. So I'll figure it out later. All right, I'm going to thicken up my highlight color here. An easy way to do that would be, honestly, to just take a brush full of this and put another drop of Listerine sand in it. It'll lighten it a little bit too, but that's not a big deal to me. So I think I'm going to actually do that. Yeah, but you should know better than that, Pendrake. You know I never really think about some of this stuff till I get there, till the character is there for me. It's very similar to my writing process. So I took a drop of Syrian sand in my brush. Even a little bit is going to thicken up my paint a bit without shifting the color too much. But yeah, it is my painting process lately is a lot like my writing process, where I just go on my gut, and sometimes my gut doesn't want to weigh in on the freehand until the character is more realized. Oh, very early meeting time. Yeah, bye hamster. Originally they were reading glasses, but these are more thick, so I almost feel like engineering goggles. She could be steampunk with only a little bit of work. You could do gears and stuff, gears and leverage diagrams here, and she'd be a very steampunk mage, which is always fun. So I'm kind of tempted to go that way with her. Impossible to paint, Zachariah. Impossible to paint. Gotta have something you can actually paint. I don't think she's a spy. I think she's a steampunk mage. She's a mage engineer. What book series? There was a book series with mage engineers. I just can't remember what book series it was. All right. So let's see if I can do this. This is going to be a little thicker. It's going to give me a little bit more of a strong highlight. I'm going to test it out a little bit on the fingers. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Yes, impossible to paint. That's why I said impossible to paint. Gotta choose something you can actually paint. Otherwise, she just got a blank book, which is perfectly viable. A little bit of light up on the tops of the fingers, not too bad. This still is, I'm feeling like this still isn't quite as strong as I'd want it, so I'm actually going to add more Syrian sand. Yeah, she's a good artificer, Minnie. I would say you're right, Agent. She's versatile that way. I mean, she's supposed to be a scribe, but I think you could take her artificer engineer kind of. Oh, I remember. It was actually a long time ago series, wow, by Niven and Barnes. And it was... But I always liked the idea of mage engineers creating magical trebuchets and things. Yeah, because I need to be able to, yeah, there we go. I need to be able to pop that highlight down with a very small area, and for that you typically want slightly thicker paint. I'm going to put a highlight right under her eye. Because the cheekbone area, the top of the cheekbone, right in the eye. It doesn't have a lot of blood flow up there, so you typically don't see the blush until you get lower down on the cheek. You want to get the upper lip, which always has highlight. And the chin. And the little corner of the mouth down here. So, using the blush kind of as a shadow there, I can define the mouth a little bit better. Now I can bring this highlight more up on the forehead. And like I said, it's pretty standard, especially with younger females and with really smooth skin minis, to just like make the forehead a little bit more golden and a little bit lighter, just uniformly, except where the brows come together. You can put in a crease there if you want to. No, it was actually in Dream Park, the Dream Park books, the character class, probably one of the earliest lit RPG books, along with The Hero and the Crown by Robin McKinley. But Dream Park had, you could be an engineer class and it had magical abilities intrinsic in the class. I always thought that was a cool idea and I always liked it. But if it shows up, this is the rule of authors. If a trope shows up in one of their books, you can almost always expect some variation of it in another book, because we all have like specific ideas that really root in our brains, and so those are the things that our brains reach for again and again. And it's our job as writers then to mix things up so that it's always a fresh take. So we'll tend to gravitate towards certain tropes, certain ideas, certain themes. And that's what makes for, an author that you can return again and again. That's why you can return again to your favorite authors and read a lot of their books and enjoy different series, even if you have a favorite, because it's still their voice and it's still their kind of idea. So there we go. It was Larry Niven and Stephen Barnes writing together. The Dream Park books are my favorite books by Niven and Barnes. I own all of them. In fact, I went out and reacquired one of them that I had lost because I love them so much. They're great books. Back when something maybe you guys don't know, because this is purely internal, like the kind of knowledge you wouldn't necessarily know unless you were on the interior of the theme park industry. But at that time I was. When Niven and Barnes came out with Dream Park and it was such a hit, it essentially is talking about using virtual reality, right? Virtual reality role-playing games, full body. Kind of immersive experience. And when those books came out, the theme parks were actually watching that. Like, there was an article, my dad worked at Six Flags at the time, and so did I, and I came into his office one day just to ask him a question, and I saw the industry bulletin on his desk talking about Dream Park, and I was like, oh, interesting. And at that time, virtual reality was nowhere near, and it still isn't, to where we would need it to be to make that kind of thing accessible and doable, but it's getting there, right? So, But it was very interesting that the theme parks at the time had perked up their ears already and thought, and were talking about, is this the future of theme parks? So I thought you guys might find that interesting because, yeah, unless you were in the industry as I was at the time, you wouldn't have known that they were watching it that long ago. There is the first Dream Park, the second is the Barzoom Project, the third is the California Voodoo game, possibly my favorite of all time. And then they did put out a recent one, the Moon Maze game, which actually I've been saving because it's written much later. Both its timeline is after, so you're working with a new character, and they wrote it like ages afterward, right? So I've kind of been saving that book for when I really, really want a dose that I haven't read before. All right, I need to kind of emphasize her lower lip. I'm going to reach for my violet red. I think I'm going to put mix a little bit of that in with a liner to define her lower lip better, because it's kind of blending into everything else. This happens on tiny minis, on 28s, even the larger 28s. You just don't have a lot of room to build contrast there. So I'm mixing brown liner in with my violet red, and it really makes this really pretty dark purpley red. So if you ever want to mix something like this, that's a great combo. I need it to stay a little bit solid. And I want to mix just a little bit of my base skin tone into it to give it opacity and to make it closer to my skin tone. Then I'm going to use that to line around the bottom edge of her lower lip. They're dated now, but if you like lit RPG, which is, for those who don't know, is the genre where people get trapped in video games, and it's a definite genre now. There are quite a few people writing in it, and it seems to be quite popular. It's very close. I mean, it's pretty much got a lot in common with lit RPG. I would say it's an early iteration. Not quite the same, but very close. All right, so I'm going to try to essentially line around that lower lip. See, I've darkened it. Yep. Yeah, well, okay. And you know what? Regular artists are just as bad. Fancy. I speak coming from 2D art world. Terminology, it's hard. Like, we try. It's try. Like, everybody's like, when you add white to a color, you should call it a tint. Do any of us do that? No. Okay, some people who really ought to be like art history professors instead of painters. Okay, some people do. Some people are persnickety. However, the vast majority of us are scatterbrained artists who are not persnickety about terminology. I mean, local color and midtone, to me, like, you'd have to define semitone to me. I went to art school, and semitone is like a foreign language to me. Nobody in my art school ever used the term semitone. Ever. Like, I literally do not know what it means. So I would say it's not just mini painters, folks. And the problem is that is the problem, really, is not that there's too few terms, but that everybody's always like coming up with a term that makes sense to them. And you've just got to do it. Like, you've just got to figure it out. Oh yeah, Planescape. I liked Planescape Torment, but the problem with world hopping portal worlds like that is that sometimes they don't have enough flavor in the base world. Planescape has always had the sigil, the city of gates, of doors. That always did have a really cool atmosphere. So I could hope that they have embraced that. Because I find that when you've got so many options, when every world, every door you go through can be a different world with a different feel, that you've got to really have a vibrant, vivid hub city that has its own feel, that adds to the feel of everything else that you can go to. And I feel like in the Torment game, you really felt that. But in Planescape materials, when I picked them up, I didn't get that feel. I didn't get it. And so, yeah, term syndrome is real. Fancy when it breaks down. When you break it down, you've just gotta you've got to use your context. You've got to use your sense of context. What somebody calls a glaze, the another person calls a juice. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, why are you calling it a juice? It's just glazing. Well, now you know there's two terms for it, which is why when I know an alternate term for a European term, like juicing versus glazing, I will almost always bring them both up so that you know. But with things like semitone, what is a semitone? Explain it to me. Actually, do explain it to me because I want to know. Right, Fancy. But to understand that, you have to be coming from a place where lighting is a part of your formula from the beginning. In United States, we don't start with light. The Europeans do, but we don't. And one could argue that possibly that's because Europe has such a very strong respect for the arts, which we do not have in the United States. So in the United States, we break it down to fundamental, functional little blocks, but we don't talk about the conceptual side, which is how light falls on the model. And when we do start bringing that in, a lot of people get intimidated and they just won't listen and they'll just back off and they don't want to even touch it. They want to become confident with the nuts and bolts techniques before they start to think about how light falls. Because it's a concept, right? It's not a mechanical thing. So it's not wrong or right. All the colors in between your light and your local. Right, okay, semitone. See? Yeah. And we just call those different highlights. Like I'll call it a mid highlight versus a highlight. I derail all the time. Haven't you understood yet that derailment is the name of this stream? Kind of like enablement is like the real name of my channel where we talk about new products on my Discord. But yeah, so it only makes sense. Semitone only makes sense if your description of it, if you're used to thinking about light, right? It makes sense to me because I have taught myself to understand, like to think about how light falls. But if you just got taught base coat, wash, dry brush, then, or you came from the GW school, which is very similar to that, maybe you're doing contrast paint, and somebody says, oh, well, when light is falling on the figure, it's blah, least impacted by light, that person's brain is going to explode, right? They don't know what you're talking about. They've got no frame of reference. So part of the terminology divide that we see in mini painting, and it's very evident now because of the internet, because everybody from all over the world is talking about mini painting all at once in the same place, which, is cool, but it also means that different philosophies of teaching and different philosophies of learning on mini painting are going to be exposed, right? Because of that different emphasis. Like, okay, so maybe if you're light focused, when you teach a class of beginner mini painters, you would just start with zenith, right? Because that lets you say, okay, so this is how you think about light and highlights, right? And maybe you start there. But a lot of people don't in this country. Well, right, Fancy, but now you're talking way beyond. Now you're talking way beyond. That's an advanced color theory concept. Do you know how many people run in fear when you say color theory in this country? So this is the thing. Now I'm going to ask you to switch your brain. You obviously have an understanding of light and color. You understand that they interact, and you can't have color without light, and you can't just look at color in a vacuum. But now change your mind and think about if you were never taught about that. What if you were only taught about dark blue, mid blue, and light blue? What if you were only, like, that was your structure, right? What if your nuts and bolts were just the area on a model you covered, and maybe the upper area is where you put your highlight, but you've never really thought about how light really falls on a model and how it changes the color of the underlying surface, right? So that's the thing. Right. And when we recommend the book Color and Light, when we recommend any book from traditional artists or any series of videos or whatever, they're going to talk about it, right? Because in 2D art, you can't get away with this stuff like you can on miniatures. Like in 2D art, you must show people where your light is coming from. And that's why I think Europe has that base understanding concept teaching method where they don't take them apart. They don't break those two things apart. In the U.S., and maybe in Canada, I'm not sure, but in the U.S., we decouple things that we shouldn't decouple in order to break it down into littler bites. And then the problem is, after that, we expect people that we're like, okay, now you've got to put it all back together. Smush, 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 and it's messy. It's very messy. So, and yet, it gets people into the hobby, and some people will never be interested in the way light falls on a figure. They just want to make a nice gaming model, right? They don't care. You say color theory to them, they're like, I don't need color theory. You just need to show me the box art and I'll paint my gaming model that way, right? Tell me what colors you used. And they'll just use the mechanical process, and they'll get perfectly fine looking models. You'll see the details, there'll be colors, there'll be highlights and shadows. But it doesn't, they're not engaging with the material to the point where you really think about how light interacts with color. When we get to that point, then we teach it as a separate thing. And honestly, I do this breakdown on my Patreon because that's how I was taught, and I understand that many people in this country, that's how they were taught. That's why I say conceptual techniques are learned after mechanical techniques, usually the way I teach. But you can do it with an integrated, it's the biggest hurdle. You can do it with an integrated approach. It's just that you're teaching entirely differently. Because if you're starting with that approach, then you're working with Zenith and probably Sketch, and you're talking about light color. But I speak as a person who taught Paint Club at Reaper for years and over a decade. Well over a decade. I've been teaching Paint Club in various locations for probably at this point, I took the last 3 years off, but over 20 years. And so I was teaching people who are brand new to the hobby a lot, or people who are just like had stumbled into beginner painting. They, one, they don't care. Two, they're not it's too much for them. It overwhelms them. It's a combo of those things. So it really depends on your audience. It really depends on your audience. And for our audience here, I found that only when a painter starts trying to really improve, like a painter, maybe they do good gaming models, but then they get interested in actually painting better. That's when they are in a good place to start thinking about light without being horribly intimidated. Right, canvas painting. I don't think it's necessary, Fancy, by the way. I mean, if you want to go back to school, do it, but you don't have to. I will tell you flat out, I learned more about how to paint light and color from miniature painting than I ever learned in art school. But then again, maybe my teachers are just bad. But you're taking that chance. When you take a class, any class, art school, miniatures class, anything, you're at the mercy of the instructor, their approach, and how they teach, and what their philosophy is. So you could spend a lot of money going back to school and not get at the fundamental thing that you want. If you are at a level to be understanding this stuff, honestly, you don't need to go take a class. You just need to sit down, practice, look at your results, analyze your results, and iterate on them. That's my opinion. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of money, and maybe you'll only walk away with a couple of nuggets, and it's going to take time. And you might have been able to get as good or even better results just spending 2 months instead of 2 years and really focusing on your painting and learning and observing and reiterating. I feel like as humans, guided classes are useful, but make sure that you know both the detriments and the pluses, right? Hi there, Keeks. You brought your bully stick in to chew? Well, thank you. That's very good. I get a Kiki next to me. Very good. Yes. Yep. It is. It is. And, you know, you might have a little bit of an easier time, as Agent Marvel says, if you started out with an art background. Yeah, exactly. I'm with Agent Marvel. Like, actually, I would go beyond that. I would even say there are artists teaching on YouTube that have courses that are paid through various course platforms, and that would actually maybe be better, because what you can do then is you can look at their teaching style on YouTube, look at their approach, and when you find an approach you really, really like, then and that makes sense to you, then you just pay for their course. And then you have an online course you can learn at your own pace, and you've already know that the instructor is one who you grok, who you actually like can learn from well, right? But yeah, so the thing is that neither approach is necessarily bad. It may make some things easier and some things harder. You know, it's and never. All right, I hate to say never or always, but seriously, never look down on somebody because they don't want to learn this. You can say, but it's integral, all you want, but if they don't, that's not what they're here for. They're here to paint a termagant so that it looks nice enough that they're proud of their job and they can put it on the gaming table. And they really don't care if the way that the light is falling on the figure isn't realistic. You know, they really don't care. And that's okay. It's okay that they don't care. It's okay that some paint styles don't embrace that. It's all right. We can't get up on our like high horse and look down. I mean, humans love it, right? We love to be right. And you got to watch out for that in yourself,